I'm glad you're all here today as we are talking about and starting just a 2-week series looking at, do we get tired? Do we get tired? We're going to look at some words for the weary. I came across some notes supposedly found on hospital charts by nurses and CNAs and everything that after they'd kind of worked a long shift. These were some of the notes that were found on patient's chart. The patient refused autopsy. Probably a pretty good thing for the patient. Here's another one. Patient recovering from forehead cut. Patient became very angry when given an enema by mistake. I can understand that. Patient has chest pain if she lies on her left side for over a year. I might have been able to diagnose that one. How about this? On the second day, the knee was better. On the third day, it disappeared. Or this one. The patient has been depressed since she began seeing me in 1993. Maybe she needs to change the doctor. I don't know. This is one I'm still trying to figure out. She is numb from her toes down. Or patient was alert and unresponsive. I like this one. The lab test indicated abnormal liver function. Maybe she's not seeing the right doctor. Or, here's my favorite. Patient has 2 teenage children, but no other abnormalities. Like I said, no doubt, these were written by some pretty sleepy, pretty frazzled, probably pretty weary nurses and interns. But I think for a lot of us, that describes our life. I mean, how many of you could say you've been weary and tired from time to time or feel that? Yeah, a lot of you, you know. Does God's faithful people, though, ever tired of moms? You ever tired of doing good? You ever tired of raising your children? It's apparently so. And I say that because Paul addresses this very issue in Galatians chapter 6, verses 9 to 10. He said this, "And let us not lose heart in doing good, for in due time we shall reap if we do not grow weary. So then, while we have opportunity, let us do good to all men, and especially to those who are of the house of faith. Let us not lose heart in doing good." Because when you lose heart, you can give up. You can give in. You can kind of just simply get tired of it all and decide to quit. You might have heard this before. It was written many, many years ago about a tired comedian. And this is kind of what he once wrote. And that he says, "Are you tired? The population of this country is 220 million, and 84 million are over 60 years of age, which leaves 136 million to do the work. People under 20 years of age total 95 million, which leaves 41 million people to do the work. There are 22 million who are employed by the government, which leaves 19 million to do the work. Don't be mad at me, be mad at the comedian. 4 million are in the armed forces, which leaves 15 million to do the work. Deduct 14,800,000, the number in the state and city offices, leaving 200,000 to do the work. There are 188,000 in hospitals, insane asylums, etc., and that leaves 12,000 people to do the work. Now, it may interest you that there are 11,998 people in jail. So that leaves just 2 people to carry the load. That's you and me. And you're just sitting here, and I'm getting tired of doing all the work. You ever feel that way? I'm getting tired of doing all the work. They call it compassion fatigue, or well-doers burnout is what we try to label it today. And sometimes it happens by very dedicated, committed disciples of Jesus. Suddenly they wake up and they realize they're tired. They're tired of giving. They're tired of doing. They're tired of serving. And they find out that their joy of serving the Lord seems to be gone or very, very diminished. Let us not lose heart, Paul said, in doing good. Apparently the apostle realized that it is possible for the heart to go out of service and perhaps to kind of cause us to want to give up, cause us to want to quit. Just after I came here, and that buddy of mine that was preaching in the church in another state, we decided to kind of get together and talk, and he'd been in ministry for a long time, and in that process of talking and sharing, this is what he was talking about, how tired he was, how weary he was of doing good, of putting all the time, effort, and energy in, and he kind of quoted the King James version of this. He says, "I'm weary of well-doing." I'm weary of well-doing. And that's, like I said at the beginning, that's what I want us to talk about. This this series, this 2-week series, is basically going to have two parts. Today, we're just going to be talking about who are those that can find themselves weary of doing well. And then next week, we're going to get very specific about how you can fight this and what you can do to make sure if you find yourself getting weary, if you find yourself getting worn out, if you find yourself getting tired, steps that you can take to battle that. So who does get weary of doing well? Well, obviously from Paul's words, any workers in the Lord's kingdom and that. You see, this passage here, it wasn't addressed, to a select few. It went out to several churches in the Galatia area. So I assume that preachers and Sunday school teachers and missionaries and those gifted at serving, elders and deacons, they're all susceptible to this. Perhaps that pop psychology term burnout is very relevant here. It happens to all kinds of people who are concerned for the work of the Lord. But also, parents sometimes get weary. I remember reading this article many years ago when I was in Bible college about a woman who telephoned a friend to ask how she was feeling, who she knew her friend was down. And the answer came across when the lady answered the phone, and that she says, "Hey, how you doing today?" And she said, "Terrible," came the reply. "My head's splitting, my back and legs are killing me, the house is a mess, and the kids are simply driving me crazy." Well, very sympathetically, the caller said, "Listen, go and lie down. I'll come right over, and I'm going to cook lunch for you. I'm going to clean the house. I'm going to take care of the children while you get some rest. By the way, how's your husband Sam?" "Sam?" the housewife said. "I have no husband named Sam." "My heavens," the woman said, "I must have dialed the wrong number." There was a long silence. And the woman who received the call said, "Are you still coming over?" Those of you with your children raised, those of us that have our children raised, a lot of the times we are prone to say, to those with little ones, "Hey, enjoy it while you can because it doesn't last long." And that can be a truthful statement. You can look back and think, wow, where have the years gone? I remember changing their diapers and now, they're out in college or graduating college. But sometimes when we're making that statement, we forget what it was like to have 2 kids in diapers or 2 going through 2 or 3 junior hires or 2 kids in diapers with junior hires and what it was to live in the moment that seemed like it was never, ever going to end. So parents can find themselves weary of doing well. But also, thirdly, those who have served a long time. See, length of service doesn't always make us more faithful. The longer we're doing something doesn't mean we're more faithful in it or we don't get tired or we're that much more mature in it. It could be and it should be, but if that were the case, then, do you know the age group that's seeing some of the most divorces today? It's not the younger ages. It's those that have been married 40, 45-ish years. You think people that have been married 40 years would figure out how to do marriage, right? And they'd be able to stay together. But they're not. So people who've been doing and serving a long time, serving God, can find themselves, if they're not careful, weary of doing well. But also those who have seen few results can feel the weariness of well-doing, we are, without a shadow of a doubt, we are a result-oriented society, are we not? You go out fishing. What do? You produce a string of your trophies. Look at the fish I caught, or look at how many I didn't, or look at how large, or look at how small, They are the string of trophies of our fish. When you hunt, those of you that like to go out deer hunting, you go out and you shoot Bambi. You go out hunting. And what do you do when you get that buck that has the huge antlers? You cut the head off, have it stuffed, and you mount it on your wall. Why? It's a trophy to show what you had done. When you go golfing, I know people that have gone golfing, and they, the first time that they score under 100, they'll take that scorecard and they'll frame it, as a trophy. Look at what I did. In all different sports that are out there, baseball and football, you have your medals, you have your trophies, and all of those things that are there. And we have these awards, that come down to us and are there for us. And we think if we're not seeing those kind of results, it can get us weary. But I was reading a story about a chaplain, true story, who was ministering seriously to a wounded soldier who was dying. And he requested the chaplain asked the chaplain if he would write a letter back to his Sunday school teacher. And the chaplain said he did. And it was just a short letter. He said, "Tell her I died a Christian because of what she taught me in that class in church. The memory of her earnest pleas and the warmth of her love as she asked us to accept Jesus has stayed with me. Tell her I'll meet her in heaven." Well, the chaplain sent the message, and a little while later, a message came back, and she said, "May God forgive me. Just last month, I resigned my position and abandoned my Sunday school pupils because I felt my work had been fruitless. How I regret my impatience and lack of faith. I shall ask my pastor to let me go back to teaching. I have learned that when one sows for God, the reaping is both sure and blessed." We might not be seeing the results the way we want to, or the results the way that the world says it there, but God's word says it doesn't come back void. And when we are standing there sharing and teaching and witnessing and evangelizing, whatever you want to classify it, when we are being that light and that salt for God, we might not see the results on this side, but the results can be there. Also, those who are affected by the lethargy of others can be candidates for this problem of weariness. You know, one person who did quit said this: "I found lots of weaknesses in the American church, and they got to me." This was a pastor who was speaking at a breakout session. I went to a conference. He had resigned his position as a pastor. He'd been in it for many years. He just couldn't take it anymore. This, wasn't seeing the results, but basically, the lethargic attitude of the people. He would talk about, "Hey, are you interested in missions?" Only on occasion. "You have a spirit of sacrifice?" "No, not much." "A willingness to serve?" "Only if it's convenient. If there's nothing better to do, then I will go to that ministry and be a part of that ministry." "A burden for the lost world?" "No, not really. I'm more focused on what I need." He said, "How could I do anything but become cynical?" And unfortunately, I did. You see, cynicism is a danger to those who work next to people who don't see the real issue, or even more so, who don't even really care. Cynicism is an outlook that says this: things are never going to work out. It will always be like this. And we can put never and always. We got to be careful with that again. But those kinds of people can get burned out. Also, those experiencing temporary failures, or what they feel are a failure. You remember Elijah? We're going to talk more specifically next week about Elijah. We're going to use him as an example of his life, of how you can defeat this weary feeling and be reminded each and every day when you find yourselves getting tired. But Elijah, he found himself sitting under this bush, under this juniper tree. And he was saying to the Lord, "Lord, just kill me." Now, I know that there are times in our life that can come to us when we get tired, when we get worn out, when we get weary, and we want to give up, and we feel like, "Really? Lord, just take me and take me now." Calgon, take me away type of feeling, type of thoughts. I know we've all had those at different ways at different times. But I want you to understand when Elijah was making this statement, okay? This is right after the Mount Carmel experience. If you're familiar with the prophet Elijah, who was serving God, he had predicted this drought and everything that was going to come, and they'd been in 3.5 years of drought, and at the end of that, he said, "All right, you people, you false prophets, you 450 false prophets, I want you to meet me in Mount Carmel that worship this false god Baal and everything, and we're going to find out who is the true, real God." So he calls them up to a contest. Remember this? He sets out 2 altars, and he says, what we're going to do is we're going to pray to our God, and the God that comes down and consumes the sacrifices on these altars, that's going to be the true, real God from this point forward. And they said, "Let's go." And so he said, "Hey, I'll be kind and I'll let you go first." And so in the morning, these 450 prophets of Baal, they start calling out they start praying out, and nothing's happening. And as the day goes on, Elijah, if you read the story, and I encourage you to, he even comes out, and he starts taunting them. "Oh, maybe your God's away on vacation. Maybe he's not here. Maybe he's going to the bathroom." All these kinds of things. And they start even crying out more. They start cutting and slashing themselves, if you remember how the story goes. All the way into evening, nothing happens. And then Elijah comes out in the evening and says, "My turn. Dig a ditch around mine. And I want you to dump." And he dumps all this water to the ditch that they dug is filled with water. And he kneels down and he says a 1-sentence prayer. And at the very end of that, the heavens open up and fire comes down and consumes everything. Not just the bull that was sacrificed, but the wood and the rocks and the water. It's all sucked up. And all these people start praising and falling down and say, "Jehovah, he is the one true God." And then he takes the 450 prophets and he has them slaughtered. And he has them killed. And it's after this great, powerful victory that we see Elijah sitting under this bush, this juniper tree, saying, God, kill me. Why? Because he thought, because there was this lady, Queen Jezebel, because it didn't affect her, and because she vowed to come after and do to him what he did to the 450 prophets, he thought it was a failure. So when we have a perceived failure, when things don't go the way we think that they're going to work out the way that we believe they should work out, it can seem like a failure. And when it's in God's hands, victory beyond victory can be more than we can ever imagine. And that failure, in his eyes, was only temporary. But you couldn't persuade Elijah at that time. Again, next week, we'll focus more on that. But those who are rejected by others sometimes want to quit. Rejection hurts, you know. When you pour your life into someone and then they turn only against what you, not only against, what you teach, but against you personally, the temptation is to say, never again. Never again am I going to open up myself. Am I going to care for? Am I going to love? Am I going to give myself to anybody, to another human being? Again, as I was putting this together, I remembered Samuel, the prophet, getting this way. The Israelites were rejecting his clear, right teaching, and they clamored for a king, and he got down in the mouth, and that's a pretty low place for a prophet of God to be, And God finally told him, he said, listen, Samuel, they hadn't rejected him, Samuel, but they rejected him, God. And it's hard not to get the two tied up when you're serving God. A lot of people like to persecute the messenger, when you have to remember who the message comes from, God himself. But those who are also lonely can begin to become very, weary, of well-doing. You're feeling rejected, it makes you kind of feel lonely. When God came to Elijah again under that juniper tree, he asked what was wrong. And he said this. He says, I've been very zealous for the Lord, the God of hosts. For the sons of Israel have forsaken thy covenant, torn down thy altars, and killed thy prophets with the sword. And I alone am left. And they seek my life to take it away. Doing God's work can sometimes feel kind of lonely. Can it not? I was reading a long time ago in an NACC, about an NACC cross-country championship held in Riverside, California. 123 of the 128 runners went the wrong way. One competitor, Mike Davaco, stayed on the 10,000-meter course, and he began waving his fellow runners to follow him. He was only able to convince 4 other runners to go with him, and at the end, and that he asked his competitors, and that asked what his competitors thought of his mid-race decision not to follow the crowd. Davaco responded, they thought it was funny that I went the right way. Sometimes in order to follow Christ, you might have to do it alone. It hurts to think that you're going the right way and everybody thinks you're crazy. So you can get weary of doing well when you think you're alone. But also, those that are criticized after a while become weary of well-doing. Personal criticism hurts. Yes, constructive criticism, it can be good for us, it can be difficult, but sometimes it's unmerited and sometimes it's wrong. In 1923, a Russian-born engineer, Vladimir Zworykin, worked on his latest invention, and he was told, quote, spend your time on something more useful, unquote. But Vladimir didn't, and in 1929, he had obtained the first patent for his television, for his invention, the color television. Among his many achievements, Vladimir also helped perfect the electronic microscope and other devices that greatly advanced medical and biological research. He retired as director of electronic research for RCA in 1954, and in 1966, he was awarded the National Medal of Science. Yet his whole career was marked with criticism almost at every single one of his milestones. Someone once said, where there is light, there's bugs. And think about that. It's probably pretty true. Well, those who also get caught up in comparisons can set themselves up for weariness and well-doing. And this is one right here, especially in the last decade, that I think has really hit the church and hit the church hard. It's brought about what's called the me thinking within the church. Me thinking. What does a church have to offer me? When people walk in, when people come looking for a church today, the greatest reason why people come to church is because somebody they know, someone they're friends with, the family, has invited them. That's still the greatest evangelistic tool. Everything that we do, I think we need to keep doing. But the greatest tool is you walking up and saying, hey, would you like to come to church with me? And that'll get them there. But a lot of the times, even when people aren't searching or are searching, when they come into a church, the last thing they ever check out is, what does that church teach when it comes to the Bible? It's doctrines that it stands on and those kinds of things. And a lot of the times when people walk through the doors of the church, what does this church have to offer me? And it brings in the me thinking, that comes into that. And we start the comparisons. Well, look at this church over here. It has this for all of this, or it has this for my age, or for my kids. Me, and type of stuff. And I understand that. We want the best of the best when it comes to that aspect on it. Instead of walking into the church and saying, what gifts, talents, and abilities do I have that I can offer this church? And it should be a different perspective from the unchurched when they walked in. I completely understand. They're coming in with the world mindset. What does this church have to offer me? When you go to a restaurant, what does it have to offer me? You go to a store, you're looking for the best of you. So I completely understand that. But for the church, for the Christian, for the mature person, they should be looking for a church where they can come in and serve and sacrifice and give and partner with to help further the kingdom of God. But it doesn't work that way. And ministers, I got 10 fingers pointed here. We fall into this comparison all the time. We'll look at a church and say, man, look at that. How can they do that? We'll compare the numbers that they have. They'll have an event. They'll have this ministry going on. We'll have the same ministry going on. And they have 5 times our numbers, They'll have a men's night out, We'll have a men's night out. They'll get, 75 to 100 men. And we'll pull 30 to a men's night out that we do. And I'm thinking, how did they get 75 or 30? And I start comparing. Stupidest thing I could do, I'll look at a church that's running, whatever, and I'm thinking, how? And then I get thinking, we don't even have 7,500 men to go to church. How in the world would I even expect this? Even if all the men invited one person to come with them, we couldn't reach the 100 number. So that comparison, we fall into that. It becomes a trap. It becomes a tool that Satan uses to beat us up. Instead of us taking a look and see how God is powerfully using where we are at and what we are doing for his kingdom and celebrating that. That's what we should be celebrating and concentrating on, And then we start comparing, and we think, wow, why should I put myself out? It doesn't matter. Well, those who are bored can feel the weariness as well. And what I mean by that is, the same old, day after day, week after week, month after month type of thing. Gerald Mann, writing in When Bad Times Are Over for Good, breaks hurting people into 4 categories. He calls them the 4 Bs. The bruised, the battered, the broken, and the bored. And steps can be and should be taken to be bored, especially, in our life. And when we're talking about serving God, if you're finding yourself bored, then maybe that's a sign, a red flag, that maybe you pull back and see, do I understand who I'm serving? Do I understand why I'm serving? And am I serving in the right place? Because if you're not serving in the right ministry, if you're not using the gifts, talents, and abilities that God has given you the right way, yes, you can become burnout, you can become bored, you can become weary of doing well. So if you find yourself bored, then maybe take a look and see, do I need to replug in another ministry? Do I need to refocus and remember who I'm working for and that? And then those experiencing poor health can find themselves weary and doing well. Because as we grow older, we have to adjust to the ailments that limit our capacity, We have to adjust to our expectations of ourselves when it comes to that. I mean, I've worked in many years in youth ministry. And we were about roughly 4 months between when Trey left us the beginning of the year until Austin has started working with us. I'm so thankful that Austin is here and all that. And, I willingly stepped up to work with the youth and be involved in the youth and help out in that transition time. And it was a great blessing to be back there working with them. But at the age of 54, I found myself coming home from these events different than at the age of 24 when I was working with kids. I would find myself looking at it and seeing these games and everything and being in and playing the games and thinking, waking up in the morning thinking, this didn't hurt when I was 24. Why does it hurt now? I did this game then, and that kind of stuff. Life changes. And there'll be times, that we just can't, our body just can't do the same things for whatever reason in our life. And so that may happen. That may transition. But those are people that can find themselves weary in doing well. And next week, like I said, I want us to address, what are some things that we could do to help if we find ourselves there, like getting rest and to reconcentrate and to regroup and to renew our spirit when it comes to that aspect. But I want to wrap this up with this little story, because maybe you can relate to this, taught by Patsy Claremont in God Uses Crackpots. She told this story about her son, Jason. She said, when he was 7, I sent him off to school one day. And a little while later, there was a knock at the door. And I opened the door, and there was Jason. I said, Jason, what are you doing here? He said, oh, I've quit school. She said, you quit school? Why? He said, well, it's too long, it's too hard, and it's too boring. She said she got a smile on her face, and she said, Jason, you have just described life. Now get back and get on the bus. And maybe that's how we feel right there. Maybe we are tired, maybe we are worn, maybe we are burnt. I don't know where you are in your walking in your journey with life. Maybe you're there and stuff like that because you've been trying to do your life on your own strength and in your own way. And you realize, I can't. My ideas have failed and all that, and I don't have the energy and the time and the strength. And maybe God brought you here today. Maybe God has given you this lesson for you to learn to, this sermon, this message for you to hear, that maybe it's the time that you give your life to Christ and let his Spirit come into you and give you the strength to find out, to reconnect, reconcentrate, refresh, and get back to the purpose for what you've been created. Maybe you've taken those steps and you've given your life to Christ, but you're finding yourself tired. Don't know why. Maybe he brought you here today to hear this, or he's allowing you to hear this so you could reconnect and remember that just like Elijah sitting under that tree, God's not done with you yet. And the miracle and the wonderful things in the way that he's used you. You need to stop comparing. And you need to start realizing the great things that God has done and God is for you. And you need to remember and renew his Spirit within you. Maybe you need to make that today. Maybe you just want prayer. I encourage you to contact our church if you have people that you want prayer for. Because you see, I want us to understand this. I want us to remember these words. No matter where we are in our walk on our journey today. Zechariah 4:6. Not by might, nor power, but by my Spirit, says the Lord God Almighty. Not by my might, not by my power, but by the Spirit of God. When I'm tired, when I'm weary, when I need rest, I turn to God. I cry out to God. Elijah at that tree, even though he wanted to die, who did he cry out to? Even though he was in total despair, it was God. And God answered him. And God empowered him, if you read the story, in ways that are just wonderful and beautiful, that he can for us still today, because it's the same God we still worship today. I encourage you as we get ready to sing. If you need to talk to someone, come forward. If you need to call the church, we'd love to be there for you.